Our next speaker is very unique. We have two speakers working together, collaborating. And Dr. Tina Serafini here is an entrepreneur of her own and designer and consultant for her own company called the TM Serafini and Associates. She has been devising courses in different fields. She's been a professor for over 12 years and an expert in communication, and she can design, like I said, courses in various different fields, so she's very unique. She does curriculum development to assessment and processes to project management and training, strategic planning, working with global professionals all over the world. So I want to welcome Dr. Tina Serafini and her colleague here, Dr. Risa Blair. And Dr. Risa Blair is very passionate about education and teaching and learning as a trainer. She's very involved and active in higher education and cooperative settings, and including project management and curriculum development and delivery for face-to-face and online settings, and exceptional skills in facilitating current delivery to meet the needs of the client. So she's very helpful with, I'm sure her and Dr. Serafini work very close when they're working together on their company, her company, Dr. Serafini's company. And so I really want to welcome these two young professors from Kaplan University. So please give them a warm welcome, and they're going to introduce their title because they've changed it to enhance they said it's going to be very exciting. So let's hear them speak today. Thank you.
Is it on here? Good morning, everyone. I'd like to also say Dr. Blair has her own company, and she's just as much of an entrepreneur and does many, many different things. So she's just as talented, definitely, even maybe more so than myself.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, so I started to think about it. Many of your backstories, what's going on behind the scenes, are equally as interesting as the presentations you're giving. And I think I wanted to know more from some of you. Tell me about the backstory. What's the impetus for your research? What's your motivation to pursue what it is you're studying? And we didn't at all include this in our current presentation, so I wanted to take a few nanoseconds to explain that. What keeps me awake at night is motivation. How do I motivate my students? How do I get them going? How do I get them excited about what they need to learn? How do I continue to make connections between what they're learning in the classroom and what they're applying in the real world for further advanced degrees or as they enter the world of work? So I think about motivation a lot and strategies to help my students get motivated or stay motivated. So that was one of the interesting factors that led me down this path, led us down this path. And so our presentation is called, Can You Hear Me Now? And it's an approach.
Can you hear me now?
You jumped the gun, we're getting there, Dr. Calles. We looked at some approaches, an innovative approach to trying to get students motivated, particularly in the online environment when we don't have this. If you're a face-to-face instructor and you can look out and you can see the sea of eyes when you're seeing this, you absolutely know what you need to do, and you need to change directions and change strategies. But in the online environment, it's far more challenging to know who's connected, who's not connected, where are we going, how well are our ideas received, who's learning what, until we get to the assessment piece. And then it's what? Where are we? So any of you who've taught online, or for many of you who have taught online, you'll notice there are far more little assignments, formative assessments along the way to try and give you those signposts to know how your students are doing. So that's the backstory. And so now I'd like to begin with the presentation. Did you want to share a bit of the backstory?
Well, we have these discussions all the time about our learners, and we're like, and even last night she came in the room and she's like, you said that about 10 times and they kept asking you the same question. So this literally keeps us awake at night thinking, how do we get them to just pay attention the first 2 times, maybe 3? And it is a frustrating cycle, and I think this will just feed more ideas to continue the debate on how to do this, really.
So,
Can you hear me now?
even if you can't hear this, those of you who are from the States, this guy is with his cell phone technology. It's an old commercial, and he's going from site to site to site. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? We feel like we're doing this in the online environment. Can you hear me now? Are you paying attention? Are you tuned in? Are you moving forward? And he was with AT&T, and what's most funny about this is he jumped ship, and he's now with Sprint. And he talks about this, I do believe Sprint, and he talks about how he's shifted, which is really quite amusing. And I'm sorry we didn't have sound, but that's what he's saying. Can you hear me now? Okay, I wanted to look at some of the basic strategies for assessment, sharing the learning expectations, going after the evidence, the data, self-assessment, how are students evaluating themselves, peer assessment, how are students evaluating others, which I'll just say a little side note about peer assessment in terms of group assignments, collaborative assignments. Peer assessment has to be part of that process. So when you're trying to evaluate students, especially in the online environment for group work, you have the students evaluate each other, and that feedback comes directly to the professor. So that way you really get a sense of what's going on, or at least you try and get a sense of what's going on. I have a long story. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but let's just say with a small group project recently, the evaluations were so different you wouldn't even know it was the same project or the same class. So it was extremely interesting to see the perspectives of the different students in terms of peer assessment. However, you can see the 3 stars by feedback. That's because we're really looking at honing in on feedback to drive students to be successful and to get them motivated and keep them motivated.
Absolutely. And the thing is here for your learners, in order to keep them engaged and motivated, the feedback has to be effective for them. So using different methods usually seems to work best, because just flat written feedback, we're not even sure if they always read it. They see the grade and that's it.
Okay, so I want to look at effective vocal feedback. It has to be based on standard strategies for effective assessment. So if you're giving voice feedback, you're not just it's got to be absolutely concrete. It's got to be connected to a rubric. It has to be clear and concise. And to that end, it's somewhat formulaic with opportunities to go off on a bit of a different path, but nevertheless, all the basics need to be included in the feedback. So that's kind of our method and our model in terms of what we're doing in voice feedback for our students. Here's a sample of a rubric, part of a rubric. So you can see it's quite detailed in terms of, okay, here's the instructional opportunity, the description. Did the student give a good description? And we're assessing how they did on the description. So although we might be checking the little boxes on the rubric, did they get a 4, did they get a 3, or is it exemplary, is it needs improvement, wherever it is, we're checking the boxes, but we're still talking about each one of these categories, so nothing is missed. The next one, the learning need. Did we discuss the learning need? This particular rubric is quite extensive. It's 18 different categories for a major final project in a graduate course. Believe me, I didn't want to stuff it all on one slide. I didn't even want to break it up across 4 slides, because in terms of clear agreement with having a rubric with 18 categories to assess for each student, I don't think it's the best strategy. I've shared it with the dean, and we're actually in a redevelopment modality. So please know it has to be reasonable for the instructor, for the professor, it has to be reasonable for the students. But nevertheless, this would be the strategy, how we would develop the rubrics and use them. Okay. In honor of being here in Florida, many of you are perhaps familiar with the sandwich method, but I've called this the Cuban sandwich method. So as we go through and we give feedback, we're going to start with some positive feedback. We don't want to just say, no, you completely missed the point. No, this isn't right. No, we want to be positive. So even if the student has submitted the wrong assignment, Jack, thank you so much for submitting an assignment for this project. However, it is the wrong assignment. Please submit the correct assignment as soon as possible. Thank you. Okay? So some type of a positive, because, when we receive feedback, it can be really sensitive. And especially if we're in an online environment where the students aren't seeing us, they're not seeing our eyes, what we're saying, how we're saying it, we need to be careful. And then the middle piece, I said negative feedback. Actually, it probably should have been constructive feedback, where they've had some opportunities to make some gains. So essentially, it is negative feedback. We're just wrapping it in a different sandwich here, calling it constructive feedback. And then we're ending on a high note to try and keep them engaged and motivated. So even if that middle part of the sandwich, like here, is by the way, the Cuban sandwich at the market is delicious. The middle piece here, even if this is the meat of the feedback we're providing, that there's a lot of constructive feedback, we still want to end on a high note with providing positive feedback to keep the students engaged in the process. After all, we want them to learn. We're walking along this learning journey with them. We're facilitating the process. We can't do the work for them, but we need to keep moving them along that path.
And that's really key. I think even Suzanne said about the facilitation being really the role as a professor, more so than just a straight lecturer. And with that facilitation, sometimes, especially online, you get very animated and excited, and you're like, hey guys, let's get this done. Because they're only hearing you, maybe seeing you sometimes, but you have to really come out of your cocoon and really hit them in a big way with your voice especially. So and when you're writing the feedback, if you're doing vocal feedback, you've got a sound that's got to come across to those learners.
So here, I really like this quote: assessment and feedback remains one of the categories that students are least satisfied with. Okay, so here's a starting point. In terms of the written assessment, this is a huge issue. So again, we tried to solve a problem in providing feedback and to get some more positive desired results.
Yeah, limitations of written communications. It's very flat. It can take a lot of time, especially if you're giving examples. They may not read it. The tone may come across completely different than you intend. So you can actually offend people of different cultures if you're not careful. And it may not be clear the points you want to make. So there's some pitfalls there that you have to be very conscious of in emails, in grading, that the students may not take the point the way you intend them to.
From a logistical standpoint, we can only type 50 to 100 words a minute, and especially if you come from near New York, you can speak at least 150 words a minute. So to that end, you can get a lot more information out there in a short time, and it's much easier for the professor. Voice can definitely help build connections. That's the point. Students can hear the caring in the instructor's voice. The tone can be light, the tone can be serious, it could be complimentary, reflective, genuine, whatever. I actually had a student write to me that because she's in an online class, she's struggling. Because she's in an online class, she's not having a face-to-face with an instructor showing disappointment. So for her, I need to do something special. I need to do a special video that shows disappointment and send it to her. Because at this point in the semester, she needs to see the disappointment in my face. She already told me what the solution is. So I've called her twice and she doesn't return my calls. So apparently she needs to actually see the disappointment. Beyond that, the intent is to have students have a sense of belonging in the class. Our students today have, at least my students, have very different expectations. If, lectures are optional, who knows if they're going to show up? Don't know.
And really, when it comes to that connection, your, like I said earlier, your personality has to come through. But one thing that I find, if they see I'm upbeat and engaging, and when I'm disappointed, they can hear it instantly. And they know they need to snap back and do something different. So it really puts that point across to them as well, because they know your personality over a period of time, and they can tell, oh, we disappointed her, we need to calm down and pay attention.
So voice feedback is well received. According to Merry and Orsmond's study, students had really positive thoughts about voice feedback. This dates back to 2008. They were using MP3 files. So this isn't particularly a brand new technology, but perhaps not a lot of people are using it, because if you have to go and record something, then you have to download it, and then you have to upload it, and then you have to hope that the student can play it with whatever player it is on their machine, it's a big nuisance, okay? But we have found a solution that's much more time effective and more seamless in terms of the process. Additionally, Lunt and Curran 2010 found a high percentage of students felt audio feedback helped them see what they missed and helped them understand what they needed to do to improve their work. And there was a preference for audio feedback versus written feedback. Let's face it, I'm going to be really honest. And it's painful, it's extremely painful. My students don't want to read, and they don't read. And if you tell them to read, they still don't read. And you can tell them as much as you want, they don't want to read. It's unfortunate, but the masses, they can take little snippets. We can, make it more linear for them and give them a few high points, things they need to focus on. That's the reality. So it's passive to an extent. They're not having to do the work to actually read and understand. They're listening and understanding.
We have faculty that actually have students that do not purchase their books.
That's right.
So that they say, well, I don't need to have the books, and now the professors are putting in the assessment, but they haven't shown that they have their own book that they actually purchased it, even if they're not reading it. I've heard of it, how crazy it is. Just since you said they don't want to read, I believe it.
Well, and now they can rent the chapters online. I mean, there are all kinds of options for them. It is crazy. It's our reality. Do you want to?
No, you covered
Okay,
that
good.
completely. When you look at this, the benefits for online faculty is it gives you that multimodality. You're not just putting flat information out there, which frankly, to be honest, most of the time they don't read. They look at the grade and that's the only thing they look at. It can save you time because once you build it into the way that you're providing feedback, it goes very quickly. So there's a little small learning curve, but you can jump over that very fast.
And it becomes fairly systematic to go through and do the voice feedback. And we can deliver high quality feedback in that instead of, the 50 to 100 words typing, it's 150 words a minute, or if you can talk fast, even more than that. And you can be strong in terms of motivating the students using tone of voice and other kinds of things that you're very limited in with written feedback.
And they will really tell you that over just doing a flat lecture, if you're kind of entertaining them, I call it putting on your show, that, oh, it was so engaging, the time went fast. Or if they're looking at the feedback, oh, that was great, I listened to it 6 times. Literally they tell us things like this, where they don't look at the written feedback 6 times, never.
So in terms of accessibility, students want to receive things in different ways. Learning styles, although they've been completely discounted, that there was never enough research to actually prove that learning styles exist. We just haven't done the research. I think we know if we teach face-to-face or teach online, we know that learning styles exist, that some students are better visual learners, some are better kinesthetic learners, some are better audio learners. And this speaks to the audio component.
And let's face it, like the last two professors spoke, you know, we've got different types of learners today. They have different expectations. They are sitting there on their gadgets playing all the time. And you've got to adjust what you do to your audience. I mean, every audience is going to be different, but our audience is drastically changing, and it's time we get on board with that. I mean, we have to.
Okay, so voice feedback does move the students to take action. That's been what we've witnessed, personally. Simpson reported students commented on positive aspects of the evaluation as well as negative aspects. So, you know, they're paying attention, they're looking at what people are saying. They like the extra touch of hearing the professor's voice, especially when the delivery modality was 100% asynchronous. Most of the online universities have that 100% asynchronous modality where the students go in whenever they want and get their work done, at least hopefully get it done by the end of the week, whatever that end date is. A week at a time, they're completing their work. And the connection of being with a student, same place, same time, is somewhat limited, although Kaplan University has a model whereby there is a 1-hour seminar each week, which I think students enjoy, And I think it helps retain students, but it's an inconvenience for some of them too, because you think about students around the world. We have a lot of military students, and they're getting lectures in the middle of the night. There's a challenge there.
Right, and we didn't do the research on this aspect, but this applies directly to them in the workforce. When they're doing on-the-job training, they've got that shadowing or mentoring, and they're getting that direct feedback, that one-on-one, you know, live feedback, and this is a way to simulate it, you know, by giving them voice feedback.
And again, the bottom line, when they're getting that voice feedback, it's helping to motivate them, do a better job the next time around, to make some corrections for potentially the current assignment if there's an opportunity for them to work in an iterative realm and improve what it is they've submitted and do better, or at the very least to do better the next time around. Motivation is increased. In an online classroom, they always say the discussions are the heart of an online classroom, that this is really where the students are interacting with each other, where the instructor is interacting with the students. This is where they get to know each other. This is where the students begin to form bonds. And I didn't even get into it here, but I know, because I have taken online classes. How many have taken online classes? Anyone? Okay. In many online classes, you have the online class, you have the discussion, you have the assignments, you have the students, you know, but then there's a lot of meta-communication that goes on about the class, behind the scenes, between the students, that the professor knows nothing about. Oh, can you believe that assignment? Can you believe that feedback? I can't believe what it is, you know, we had to do, or wow, that was so powerful, what he or she said in that discussion. You know, it really made me think, I really learned. That's a takeaway. I mean, I've had so many students say, oh yeah, what we talked about last week, I had an interview and I used what we talked about last week in the interview, and it really made a difference. Well, that's where I'm always trying to make those connections between what they're learning in my class, any class. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It's like, tell me who was talking about TQM.
Maybe they're not here.
Maybe he's not here. There was a professor talking about Dennis Bilowski was talking about TQM. In every single class, he talks about total quality management and project management and timelines. For me, in every class, whatever I teach, whatever concept needs to be connected to the real world, needs to be connected to the job market. There needs to be some kind of a draw, some kind of a line for my students to be successful in that way.
And when you talk about the side discussions, if your technology allows you to close down private chats, I suggest you do it, because I found out in one course I was doing, the students were actually fighting with each other during class in private chat. I didn't know anything about it. So you have to know your technology as well.
In 60 students I worked with over 8 weeks, I provided I provided voice feedback 7 times for each student and evaluated, obviously, contributions to the discussions, and this helps to build the students' awareness and helps to build their knowledge, helps them to be more successful. And this last metric you can't see here,
Yeah, 40%.
in terms of discussions, the discussion grade for this particular class was 40% of the grade. So that's a huge number at stake. They had to bring a lot to the table in these discussions, 40% of the grade, so it was very important for them to get feedback early and to get thorough feedback, to know what they needed to do to tweak, to change the next time around. And without exception, in all the online universities, the discussion runs for a week, that's it. So when the week ends, it's not like they can have a redo. The discussion is supposed to be live in real time. Here's some feedback from the students, which I thought you might enjoy. The positive feedback I've received from you has been extremely inspirational. Good. I really enjoy the voice feedback you utilize. It adds a whole other level of depth to the feedback process. There's something impersonal. I'm a Gen Xer, so this is subjective about communication, limited to text and email. I look forward to these interactions. I look forward to your messages each week. I enjoy hearing your feedback. It adds a very personal touch that sets you apart from other professors. Thank you so much for the message. That was a great touch to have the recording. I was very excited and pleased with my grade. These are actual quotes. They're not edited. Just the names were removed. So you can see these were positive.
Vocal feedback can help improve your retention of students as well. The more connections you build with them, the more likely they're going to continue. Especially struggling students, they need to hear from you and know that you care about their progress and their ability to do well, no matter what you're facilitating. And it's more likely they're going to remain with the course, finish, come any obstacles they have, and work a little bit harder because they feel like you're there supporting them. They don't feel alone on an island, which typically can happen if they don't feel engaged.
That's true. Many of the online universities, I'm going to say it, nonprofit as well as for-profit, the concern is retention, okay, is keeping the students in the class. What do we need to do to keep them there and for them to be successful? I know Arnie Duncan with the Department of Education has really, I'm going to say it, hammered the for-profit universities, but the nonprofit universities are just as interested in retention and go to at least as great lengths as the for-profits, if not more so. Some of the drawbacks of audio feedback, and I surveyed all my students and I asked, would anyone rather have written feedback, or does anyone not like the voice feedback? Well, this one student wrote to me and said, I'd really prefer written feedback. And I thought, this is, what keeps us up at night. She doesn't like me, she hates me, she's going to give me a bad evaluation, she hates the class, she's not connected. I was so wrong. I mean, in the end, she was extremely complimentary personally, and even after the grade was submitted. So it wasn't like she was complimentary while I was doing the final grades, it was after the fact. She just really had such a strong desire to have the written feedback, so I honored her wish. So I think it's up to us to kind of do it like Burger King, give them what they want their way. And so I asked the question, and this was the response, and so I responded, and I honored her wish. Students might have preferences, but they might be afraid to speak up, so there might be some who really want the written feedback but didn't mention it. Some may have hearing disabilities or auditory processing disorders, and there may be an issue there. Vocal feedback can provide hidden messages. They could be positive or they could be negative, so these are some of the drawbacks. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect model.
No, I agree.
However, and these are just two learning management systems who are innately including audio feedback, so it's built right into the learning management system. Really simple to just click the button, give the audio feedback, go forward. And I know Canvas has video feedback. I'm not sure about Desire to Learn, the current version, if it has video feedback as well, but within the industry, they've recognized that this modality of being able to provide audio feedback is so important that they've included it. Although Blackboard, who has 75% of the market share in the learning management business, still hasn't included it, although they do sell other products you can buy as add-ons so you can get through the path, although it's not particularly easy. I really like this feedback loop.
Right. I think this is something we go through without thinking about. We do our instruction. We assess the students, whether it's, peer assessments, self-assessments, or you yourself as the facilitator. We give them feedback, and then we sit back and think, how can I improve that? And hopefully the students are doing the same. We hope they're completing the loop. With our feedback, that's kind of the thing to motivate them to take that last jump around the curve, go back to the instruction and through the loop again. So, but I think it's important that we think about this, and that's why we like this model, because it says to us, okay, we need to keep it up here instead of in the back of our mind as part of what we've learned as facilitators over many years.
Okay, so I just want to quickly go through the tool that we used. It's called Vocaroo. You can find it VOCAROO.com. And it's very neat. Two things that I particularly like. One is I don't have to download this and install it on some machine, so I could be on any computer and use it. I don't need an account. They're not tracking me. The other thing that I thought was outstanding was that in the end, you can just save a link out there that's not a searchable link. So essentially the feedback you're providing is confidential. Because I've tried to experiment with finding a way to really make it confidential for video, but the path isn't so easy. This is saved out there on the cloud, and for me that's great because in terms of the process,
I always wonder where the cloud is. That's why I'm like, who's in that cloud?
It's out there on the cloud. I can copy and paste that link. The students can pull it up on their phone and play the feedback. Done. Easy. So essentially, you click to record. It's, as I said, quick, easy, confidential, accessible on all devices. To set up the technology, there's no setup. It's click on the link. You have to accept a little pop-up if you're using an external mic that it could access the mic. And you just say yes. Check to make sure whether you're using an external mic or the internal mic. I mean, very, very small, very minor.
Non-techies can operate it.
Easy. And in terms of the process here, I know we've got 1 minute. Organize your thoughts first. So the process I use, I review the rubric, I score the rubric first, I think about what I'm going to say with what the student has written, the work that I'm assessing, and then I go through it with voice, the items in the rubric, and I give the feedback. So I'm looking at the rubric, shared screen. So I'm looking at the rubric, looking at the assignment, looking at Vocaroo, which I make the windows small so I can get through it, and that's why I use a 17-inch laptop. And it makes it easy. Put your thoughts together just like you would write them, but you're going to speak them to the student. And if you make a mistake, the other thing is, after you get done, listen to it, make sure it's recorded. If you make an error, it's really easy to redo it. and then save it, and you can copy and paste the link and just make it an active hyperlink in whatever learning management system you're using, or if you wanted to give the feedback via email, you know, whatever your choice is with your modality. That's how to use Vocaroo. Here are our references. Are there any questions?
And I just wanted to say, before we do take
Okay.
any questions, I have one thing. You know, obviously, virtual facilitation is not going to go away, so whether you're doing it right now or not, start experimenting, because eventually you will be doing it. It's continuing to grow, not only academically, but in the corporate America by bounds, leaps and bounds. And there's a lot of money to be had in those areas, so it's going to continue to grow. And, you know, the research in this area is really interesting.
This topic is really neat. Have you ever done a study on assessing the students that read your assessment, maybe in one class versus the students that actually listen to it? Like, have you seen the studies on that? Like,
I haven't tried it that way.
It'd be really